I am Caleb Grayson, 34 years old, an oil engineer who has wandered throughout the Middle East for 7 long years. Life there is harsh, with scorching sun, dusty sands, and exhausting work shifts that drain you completely. But I endured it all for a simple reason: family. Every dollar I sent home was a piece of hope that my parents, David and Linda Grayson, would have a more comfortable life in Houston, Texas. And my younger brother, Tyler, might use it to get back on his feet after his youthful mistakes. 7 years away from home, I've only returned a few brief times, but this time is different. A rare long leave lasting a whole month made me excited like a child. I carried my old suitcase, a few small gifts, a shawl for Mom from Dubai, a pipe for Dad from Jordan, and a silver bracelet for Tyler, along with a longing for family that never faded. It was like a lingering wound, growing larger with each passing day. The plane landed at Houston Airport in the late afternoon, as the sun was setting behind the skyscrapers. I rented an old pickup truck at the airport and began the journey back to the old neighborhood. The highway was wide and open, but my heart was narrow with memories. I remembered the familiar streets where Tyler and I used to run and play baseball, where Dad taught me how to fix cars, where Mom sat on the porch waiting for us to come home for dinner. 7 years, everything might have changed, but I hoped the house remained the same: warm, simple, and full of laughter. The truck rolled into the old neighborhood as dusk fell. The old oak trees still stood there, leaves rustling in the Texas autumn wind. I slowly drove through the familiar roads, each scene evoking memories like an old film. There was the park where Tyler and I once fought over a ball, now freshly painted. There was the Smith's grocery store, still with its old sign. My heart beat faster as I turned onto our street. But then, everything seemed to stop. The house was pitch dark, silent like a ghost. No old pickup truck of Dad's parked in the front yard with scratches from years of work at the mechanic shop. No sign of Mom on the porch with her floral apron and warm smile. Only darkness enveloped it, curtains drawn tightly as if the house had been abandoned. I parked the truck by the curb, turned off the engine, and stepped out. The cool evening Texas air seeped into my skin, carrying the familiar smell of decaying leaves. My heart began to pound, a strange feeling creeping into my chest. Maybe they're out somewhere, I told myself, trying to reassure. I approached the front door and knocked lightly a few times. No answer. Knocked harder, still silence. I tried the doorknob. It was locked tight. The curtains were drawn, not a single gap to peek inside. I looked around. The neighbors were quiet too, only the wind whistling through the dry trees, creating a rustling sound like mysterious whispers. A few nearby houses had lights on, but no one came or went. My heart suddenly felt heavy. 7 years away, I'd imagined the reunion so many times. Mom hugging me tightly, Dad patting my shoulder with a big laugh, Tyler, now 26, probably teasing me about my prematurely gray hair from the desert sun. But now there was only a terrifying silence. I pulled my phone from my pocket, intending to call Dad. The familiar number appeared on the screen, my finger hovering over the call button. But then, I stopped. A memory flashed. A few days ago, while scrolling social media on the flight, I accidentally saw a post from Tyler's account. A photo of a luxurious party with the caption, "Big day coming up, engagement." I'd chuckled to myself, thinking my little brother was finally settling down. Today was that day, Tyler's engagement party. Maybe Mom and Dad were there. How could I forget? My heart lightened a bit, but something still felt off. Why didn't they tell me? I'd messaged Tyler a few days ago saying I was coming home, but he only replied briefly, "Good you're coming back." No mention of his upcoming wedding. I shook my head, put the phone back in my pocket, and hurried back to the truck. I had to go there. I looked up the address on the map, a luxurious villa in an upscale residential area on the outskirts of Dallas. About 200 miles away, but I didn't care. I started the engine and the truck sped off on the highway, leaving the old neighborhood behind. The drive lasted nearly 2 hours, but to me it was like an endless stream of thoughts with no end. The Texas highway stretched endlessly under the darkening sky. The headlights illuminated sections of the road ahead before quickly fading, leaving behind a thick darkness and a choking silence. I tried to focus on the wheel, but my mind was filled with unanswered questions. Why didn't they say anything to me? Why did Tyler hide it? And was I really coming home, or just an outsider trying to cling to memories that no longer had a place? Finally, the truck stopped in front of the villa's gate. I turned off the engine, stepped out, and was immediately overwhelmed. This wasn't a house. It was a palace. The towering iron gate, decorated with intricate patterns, opened to a stone-paved path leading to the grand hall. Luxury cars, Mercedes, BMW, even a few Lamborghinis lined up, glistening under the streetlights. Guests were dressed elegantly, men in shiny black suits, women in sparkling evening gowns with diamonds, entering the hall with lively chatter and laughter. Massive crystal chandeliers hung suspended, reflecting on the long red carpet, creating a scene like in a Hollywood movie. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with fresh flowers wafted through the air. I stood there in my old jeans and wrinkled shirt from the flight, feeling out of place like an intruder. This was my brother's engagement party? Had Tyler climbed to this level? My heart mixed pride with unease. I walked through the gate, trying to blend into the crowd, but then, amid the opulence, I suddenly froze. In front of me, not far from the main hall, were my parents. Dad, David Grayson, was bowing his head, face flushed with shame, hands gripping the edge of his old coat tightly. Mom, Linda, stood beside him, hands trembling, eyes red as if about to cry. A few guests entering turned back curiously, whispering something. My heart seemed to stop. What was happening? I moved closer, trying not to draw attention, but the scene before me made my blood run cold. In front of my parents was Tyler, my brother, in an expensive suit, hair slicked back smoothly, looking like a high society gentleman. But his face was cold, without a trace of warmth. He looked at our parents with eyes full of contempt, as if staring at strangers. Then his voice rang out, loud, overpowering the music from the hall. "I told you to already. Don't come here. This is a party for the elite, not a place for beggars like you." Those words stabbed straight into my heart like a knife. My parents stood frozen, Mom biting her lip to hold back tears, Dad bowing his head even lower. Tyler pulled out his wallet, withdrew a few bills, maybe 20s or 50s, and threw them on the ground like alms to beggars. The papers fluttered down, landing at my parents' feet. "Take this and go," he shouted, then signaled to the butler nearby. "Get them out of here quickly." The butler, a middle-aged man in a black uniform, bowed and ushered my parents out, but his gestures were full of dismissive intent, like shooing flies. Some guests stopped, whispering and gossiping, even a few taking sneaky photos with their phones. Chuckles echoed from somewhere. My parents, who had sacrificed their whole lives for us, were being publicly humiliated in front of everyone. I stood frozen, my body burning hot like fire. Blood rushed to my head, ears ringing, heart pounding like a war drum, my hands clenched until they were white. A surge of uncontrollable anger rose like a storm raging in my chest. How could Tyler do this? My brother, flesh and blood, now rejecting our parents like this. I stepped quickly toward them, feet propelled as if by fire. Each step was heavy, but the rage drove me forward. When I got close, I growled loudly, calling my brother's name. The sound echoed in the hall, sharp like thunder, making several people turn to look. Tyler startled, his face paling. My parents lifted their heads, eyes wide with surprise. And then everything seemed to pause, waiting for the storm about to hit. My parents, David and Linda, startled, turning sharply toward me. When their eyes met mine, they froze. Their eyes widened, lips moving soundlessly as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. I stood there amid the lavish crowd in my dusty jeans and wrinkled shirt from the long flight. 7 years away from home, I had changed. Taller, more tanned, with wrinkles around my eyes from the Middle Eastern desert sun. But to my parents, I was still Caleb, their eldest son whom they had waited for all these years. In that moment, their eyes sparkled with hope, joy, and sorrow, the kind of emotion that chokes in the throat when reuniting with a long-absent son. Mom raised her hand to cover her mouth, tears beginning to roll down her cheeks. Dad clenched his fists, his face flushed not from shame anymore, but from overwhelming emotion. I could clearly see the pain in their eyes mixed with unexpected delight. All these years they had endured alone without a single complaint in our brief video calls. And now, I was back, only to witness this. My own brother betraying our flesh and blood. Tyler also froze. His face went deathly pale, drained of all color. His eyes darted quickly as if searching for an escape, shifting from me to our parents and then around the crowd. Without a greeting, without a word, he immediately turned and tried to slip into the hall as if he hadn't seen me at all. He walked hurriedly, shoulders slightly hunched, trying to blend into the lively, laughing guests inside. My heart pounded, the anger still burning hot in my chest. This brother of mine, who once ran after me all over the playground as a kid, was now trying to flee from his own older brother? I wanted to rush forward, grab him by the collar, and yell in his face how he dared treat our parents like this. But I held back, waiting to see what he would do next. The air around us suddenly grew heavy. The music from the grand hall still echoed, but everything seemed to slow down, like a slow-motion scene in a movie. But before he could get far, a woman emerged from the main hall. She appeared like a ghost from a world of luxury, wearing a meticulously tailored white gown adorned with sparkling stones under the chandelier lights, clearly an expensive bridal outfit for a lavish engagement party. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, diamond jewelry glittering on her neck and ears, and she walked with confident arrogance. That was Tyler's fiancée, Madeline Carter. I had never met her, but from what Tyler posted on social media, I could guess. She held a champagne flute in her hand, her eyes scanning side to side as if checking if everything was perfect. When she approached, she stopped, glanced at Tyler, then swept her eyes over me and my parents with a superficial, indifferent look as if we were insignificant obstacles. Not a trace of curiosity, not a hint of warmth, just a fleeting contempt. Madeline asked Tyler in a haughty, half-cold, half-impatient voice, "What are you still doing standing here? It's time to prepare for the ceremony." Then she slightly frowned, looking at his face and adding, "Why do you look so pale, like you've seen a ghost?" Her voice rang out clearly, overpowering the surrounding whispers. The nearby guests began paying more attention. A few stopped walking, curiously glancing over. My heart felt squeezed. Did she even know who we were? Did she not realize that the two trembling people standing before her were her future in-laws? Tyler shuddered, his voice stammering. His mouth opened and closed several times like a fish out of water, his eyes shifting from me to our parents and then to Madeline. He was panicking. I could see it clearly. Sweat began beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air. Finally, in a trembling, fractured voice strained with tension, Tyler stuttered, Some homeless people came to disrupt the wedding. I'm trying to stop them so they don't ruin the party." The air fell silent. Those words rang out clearly, each one slicing through the space like a knife. Homeless? Disrupting the wedding? I stood frozen, my ears ringing with rage. Our parents, who had raised him, sacrificed everything, were now being called homeless by him? Mom froze, clutching her chest with both hands, collapsing to the ground as if all her strength had vanished. Tears welled up in her eyes and overflowed uncontrollably, choked sobs echoing in the grand hall. Dad quickly supported his wife, pulling her tightly into his arms. His face hardened, but his eyes silently ached with pain. He said nothing, just gently stroked her back, as if trying to keep her from completely breaking down. I saw his shoulders trembling slightly, the deep wrinkles more pronounced on his aged face. After years of hard labor at the mechanic shop, Dad had never bowed his head to anyone, but now he had to endure humiliation from his own son. Madeline looked at my parents with a cold expression mixed with disdain. She smirked faintly, shrugged, shook her head, and said sarcastically, "Oh my God, some people really have no shame. Poor and still thick-skinned enough to show up at a fancy wedding to beg in front of everyone like this." Her voice echoed, full of superiority, as if speaking about inferiors. The surrounding guests began whispering louder. A few chuckled, and phones were raised again to snap photos. From her tone, her words, and her gaze, I immediately realized she had no idea that the people she had just insulted were her future in-laws. She only thought they were beggars causing trouble, a minor glitch in her perfect party. My heart felt torn apart. Madeline, the girl Tyler was about to marry, was standing there, sipping champagne and mocking his own family without knowing it. I stood like a statue. Every word from Tyler, every glance from Madeline, every sob from Mom, all twisted deep into my soul like bloodless cuts. My blood boiled, ears ringing, vision blurring with fury. 7 years away, I'd imagined reunions countless times, but not like this. Not witnessing my brother disowning our family, not seeing our parents publicly humiliated. The anger inside me erupted like wildfire, spreading through my chest until it was hard to breathe. I strode quickly toward them, my legs propelled by an uncontrollable instinct, my eyes sharp as knives piercing through the glittering lights and fake laughter of the party. I didn't care about the luxury, didn't care about the curious stares from those around me. In my mind, there was only one thought. I had to expose Tyler's true face, right here, right now, before he could weave any more lies. But then Dad reached out to stop me. He grabbed my arm, shook his head, and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Don't, son. Don't make a big scene." Mom also clutched my other arm, her tear-filled eyes pleading with me, lips trembling. "I beg you, don't ruin your brother's happiness." They, the ones being insulted, rejected, were the ones begging me to stop. For Tyler, for his happiness. My heart felt crushed. How could they do that? After everything Tyler had done, they were still protecting him? But I understood. That was parental love, unconditional, no matter how painful. I clenched my teeth, lips pressed together until they bled. The salty taste of blood spread in my mouth, but the rage still swirled. I swallowed it down, not for Tyler, but for the two people who had given me life, who now only knew to bow their heads and endure to preserve a shred of dignity for a son no longer deserving of it. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the trembling in my body. The crowd still watched and whispered, but I ignored them. I supported Mom, guiding both of them away from the villa's gate. Dad walked beside us, shoulders slumped, Mom leaning on me, tears still falling. We walked in silence, the engagement party music echoing behind us like mockery. No more words were spoken, but before turning away, I shot Tyler one last glance. A cold, hate-filled look, like a silent warning of what was to come. He stood there, face still pale, and I knew he understood. This wasn't the end. The drive taking my parents away from the villa lasted nearly 2 hours, but to me, it felt like an endless stretch of time, drawn out by chaotic thoughts. We sat in the old rented truck, no one saying a word the entire way back to Houston. Inside the vehicle, there was only the hum of the air conditioning, the whistle of wind through the slightly open window, and choked silences that no one dared to break. I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw Mom huddled in the back seat, staring out into the pitch-black window, her hands clutching a handkerchief already soaked with tears. Dad sat beside her, head bowed, hands resting on his knees as if trying to stay calm. The atmosphere was so heavy that I could feel it pressing on my chest, making every breath difficult. I wanted to ask, to shout why Tyler had done this, but the words stuck in my throat. 7 years away from home, I had sent back thousands of dollars, thinking they would help the family live better. Now I realized everything had probably gone wrong long ago. When the truck stopped in front of the old house in Houston, darkness had already enveloped the neighborhood. The house was still the same, with the front porch scattered with fallen leaves and the old swing creaking in the wind. Mom turned to look at me, her eyes red and swollen, glistening under the dim streetlight. She said nothing, just reached out and lightly touched my arm as if to make sure I was really there. Not a dream. Dad also bowed his head, placing his hand gently on my shoulder, a silent thank you in his familiar way. Few words, but full of affection. We walked into the house together. our steps heavy. The familiar old atmosphere rushed back immediately. The musty smell of damp wood from the floor, the lingering scent of toasted bread from breakfast, and a hint of lavender from the dried flower vase Mom kept on the table. The yellowish light from the hanging lamp illuminated the small living room, where everything remained exactly as it was the day I left 7 years ago. As soon as the door closed behind us, like a barrier against the outside world, Mom broke down crying. She threw her arms around me, sobbing as she held me tightly in her frail embrace. Her tears soaked my shirt, and I could feel her trembling, not just from sadness but from years of pent-up emotions. Dad stepped forward too, wrapping his arm around my shoulder and squeezing gently as if to confirm I was truly there, not an illusion. We stood like that, the three of us hugging in the cramped room, Mom's cries mixing with Dad's deep sighs. For the first time in all those years, I felt the fragility of our family, like a cracked glass vase, waiting for one touch to shatter completely. We moved to the living room and sat on the old sofa, scarred from the days when Tyler and I used to jump on it. Mom wiped her tears with her sleeve, her voice trembling as she asked about my work, my health, my life abroad. "How have you been eating over there? Do you get sick often? Is the job very hard, son?" Her voice shook as if she was trying to steer the conversation toward ordinary things to forget the pain we'd just endured. I told her about the long days on the oil rigs in the Middle East, the skin-scorching sun, the blinding dust storms, but I kept it light, avoiding the lonely nights when I missed home. Dad listened to every word, his eyes shining with pride mixed with regret. "My son is a talented engineer now," he said softly, his voice hoarse with emotion. He talked about the times they received the money I sent, how the neighbors praised me, but his eyes avoided mine when Tyler's name came up. We hugged in the small room, tears falling faster than we could wipe them away, after years of separation and silent misunderstandings never spoken aloud. I remembered those brief video calls where my parents always smiled and said everything was fine. But now I knew behind those smiles lay so much suffering. My heart ached sharply, yet it also felt strangely warm. At least now, we were together. No TV, no music, just the creaking of the ceiling fan and my voice asking my parents what had happened while I was gone. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I needed the truth. Dad took a deep breath, glanced at Mom for approval, then slowly began to tell the story. His voice was low and weary. Ever since Tyler got out of prison, he's been living off us. He wouldn't work, wouldn't change, just stayed home and depended on us. He described how Tyler returned after a short sentence for theft in his youth, promising to turn his life around. But then he grew lazy, spending days lounging in front of the TV or going out with friends, spending money without a second thought. My parents had always shown special love for Tyler, perhaps out of guilt over his past. They blamed themselves for not raising him better, so they could never bring themselves to kick him out. They chose to endure silently, hoping one day he would change. But day by day, that hope faded like a flickering flame in the wind. Mom interrupted, her voice choking. "I kept thinking if we just gave him time, he'd come around. But the further it went, the farther he strayed." I listened in stunned silence, my eyes scanning the house. The furniture was still the same as when I left for abroad, worn and dusty. The curtains had faded, bleached by the harsh Texas sun. The ceiling fan creaked with every turn like the sighs of time passing. The wooden floor was mottled with old scratches from moving furniture, and some spots cracked from dampness. Everything was old, shabby, a complete contrast to the luxurious villa I'd just left. My heart felt heavy. I turned to them, my voice low but weighted. "Why didn't you use the money I sent to fix up the house, buy new things? I didn't send it for this." Mom hesitated, glanced at Dad, then lowered her head, her voice barely a whisper. "All that money, Tyler took it all." Her words exploded in my mind like a bomb. She explained in detail, her voice trembling. At first, Tyler only asked for a little, saying it was to invest in some project, promising to pay it back when he profited. But then time after time, whenever he ran out, he made excuses. sometimes borrowing to pay debts to friends, sometimes desperately needing cash, sometimes just lashing out in anger when refused. Though he never threatened directly, Tyler constantly applied emotional pressure. He would yell, get angry, sulk whenever denied, smash things, or leave the house for days, leaving my parents feeling guilty, exhausted, and too drained to resist. Sometimes just a sharp glance or a vague remark like, "Don't you love me anymore?" was enough for Mom to rummage through drawers and hand over whatever was left, just to preserve a fragile peace in the small home. She told the story with tears streaming down, her hands trembling as she covered her mouth. I clenched my fists, my chest tightening as if squeezed. Not because of the money can be earned again, but because it was the sweat and effort I'd poured out in a foreign land, the grueling shifts under the scorching Middle Eastern sun, the lonely nights missing home. Every dollar meant for my parents to live comfortably had been squandered by my brother like it fell from the sky. I imagined Tyler using it to buy expensive suits, rent fancy apartments, and now throw an engagement party with a rich girl. Rage surged, but I held it back, not wanting to hurt my parents more. Mom raised her hand to her face, her voice breaking. "Your father and I thought about telling you many times, but we were afraid you'd worry, afraid you'd quit your job, afraid it would distract you so far away. We just wanted you to feel at ease and focus on your work." Dad nodded, eyes distant. "We only wanted you to be safe out there. As for here, as long as the two old folks could get by day to day, that was enough." His words cut into my heart like a knife. They had sacrificed too much, not just money, but their health and peace of mind, to shield Tyler and now me too. I sat in silence, my heart aching as if crushed. In the dim light of the old hanging lamp casting long shadows on the walls, I knew everything in this family had cracked too deeply, and the only one responsible for mending it was me. Tyler had gone too far, but I wouldn't let him destroy everything. That night, lying on the old bed in my room, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The wind whistling outside the window sounded like whispers from the past, and I made a promise to myself. I would find out everything, and if necessary, I would confront my brother. The storm was coming, and this time I would be the one to control it. The next morning, I woke up early and brewed strong black coffee in the small kitchen. The aroma of coffee spread, mingling with the smell of old wood and a hint of damp mold from the walls. My parents were still asleep, probably exhausted from the day before. I sat alone at the dining table, looking out the window where Texas sunlight filtered through the faded curtains. Everything in this house reminded me of my parents' silent sacrifices. The chipped wooden table, the wobbly chairs, and the kitchen drawer where Mom used to keep the money I sent home. Every one of those dollars, earned from grueling shifts under the Middle Eastern desert sun, had now vanished into Tyler's hands. I gripped the coffee mug tightly, the bitterness spreading in my mouth, much like the resentment rising within me. I needed to know more, to understand exactly what had happened. I couldn't let things slide like this. When my parents woke up, we had a simple breakfast, toasted bread with butter and Mom's homemade strawberry jam. The atmosphere was still heavy, but I decided to break the silence. I sat across from them, staying calm, and in a low voice asked about yesterday. Why they had shown up at the villa in that state, and why it seemed no one knew they were Tyler's parents. My question was like a time bomb, suddenly making the living room air tense. Mom, Linda, hesitated and looked at her husband, her eyes red as if she might cry again. Dad, David nodded slightly, signaling her to tell everything. He placed his hand over hers, a familiar comforting gesture I remembered from childhood whenever the family faced hardships. Mom took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she began. She said that from the money I sent home, Tyler had taken a lot, but he never explained what it was for. He never gave details, just said he needed it for work or to invest in some big opportunity. At first, Mom thought it was a good sign. Tyler was trying to make something of himself, changing after his time in prison. But then more and more money disappeared, and he came home less and less. She spoke with a choked voice, hands clutching the tablecloth tightly. I kept thinking he was using it for school or starting a business, son. But then I realized that wasn't the case. I listened, my heart pounding, trying to suppress the anger building up. After that, they noticed Tyler changing cars, from Dad's old beat-up one to a shiny luxury German sedan. He wore nothing but designer clothes, polished leather shoes gleaming in the sun, and a flashy watch on his wrist, the kind I knew cost a month's salary for me. Tyler moved out to live alone, renting a high-end apartment in a luxury complex on the outskirts of Houston, with a swimming pool, gym, and 24/7 security. Mom recounted it with eyes full of sadness. He said living alone was more convenient for work, but I knew. He was starting to distance himself from us. Dad interjected, his voice deep and muffled. I saw him changing, son. He's not the old Tyler anymore. I pictured him driving his fancy car home, stopping by only to grab money, then rushing off without a word of concern. My heart ached sharply as if someone were squeezing it. How could he do this? The money I sent was for my parents to live comfortably, not for Tyler to build a fake life. Then one day they heard Tyler mention he was dating a very special girl. He mentioned it casually during a short phone call, his voice excited but vague, but he never brought her home to meet them. No photos, no name, no further information. Mom said that during the time Tyler was dating this girlfriend, he almost never talked about bringing her home. Every time my parents mentioned it or suggested meeting her, he dodged the topic, changed the subject, or even got visibly annoyed if pressed. He said she was busy or it wasn't the right time yet, Mom said, her voice fading. I remembered those video calls where Tyler always smiled and talked about his new life but never mentioned the girl. Now I understood why. He was hiding us, hiding his poor roots. Anger began to boil, but I stayed calm and asked further. What about the engagement party? How did you know to go? Mom bowed her head, her voice trembling. On the day of the engagement party, they hadn't received any invitation. They only found out through an old classmate of Tyler's. He ran into Mom at the supermarket, bragging about the big wedding and showing her photos of the invitation on social media. The invitation was lavish, with gold lettering on premium paper, listing the villa address in Dallas. Mom couldn't believe it, so she asked Dad to check the address on their old map. They had no car, no one to drive them, so they wore the nicest clothes they could. Mom in her old dress she'd altered, Dad in his only remaining suit from their wedding day. They took the bus all the way there, a long, grueling journey under the harsh Texas sun, hearts full of hope to witness their son's happiness. I thought at least he'd be happy to see us, Mom said, tears rolling down her cheeks. But when they arrived, they weren't allowed in because their names weren't on the guest list, and no one recognized them. The security was polite but cold, asking them to wait outside the gate. They stood awkwardly at the entrance, under the blazing sun, about to call their son when Tyler suddenly appeared. His eyes were ice cold, without a trace of warmth. Then he loudly chased them away like strangers, threw money at them like charity, and called the butler to shoo them off. Mom recounted it all with a trembling voice choked with pain, her hands clenched until they were white. Dad sat silently, eyes fixed on the floor, shoulders shaking slightly. I bowed my head, clenching my fists until my nails dug into my skin. My own flesh and blood brother, who shared the same blood, grew up in this very house, had built an entire fake life, denying his roots just to chase upper-class dreams. Everything expensive Tyler now had, the nice car, luxury home, designer clothes, and all his boastful words, had been bought with the money I toiled for in the distant desert and with my parents' silent endurance. The sleepless nights worrying about him, the extra hours Dad worked to pay for his legal troubles, all discarded by him like trash. I looked up, my eyes no longer filled with pain, but cold, resolute, like a block of ice cracking inside me. Everything suddenly became crystal clear. Why no one knew about Tyler's parents. Why there was no invitation. Why Madeline, the bride in her sparkling white gown, dared to insult her future in-laws without realizing it. Tyler had erased all traces of his poor family, crafting a smooth facade to infiltrate high society. He had chosen to disown his origins, betray those who gave him life, just to maintain the false image he'd traded his honor and morals for. I imagined him smiling and chatting with Madeline and her family, fabricating a glamorous past, perhaps saying his parents were dead or that he came from a wealthy family. My heart pounded, blood rushing to my head. The anger was no longer explosive like at the villa. It was compressed, colder, sharper, more dangerous. It was like a knife being honed, waiting for the moment to strike straight into Tyler's fake heart. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I'll handle this. My parents looked at me, eyes full of worry. Mom grasped my hand. Don't do anything rash, okay? No matter what. He's still your brother. I know you're angry, I'm hurting too, but I don't want to lose another child. Our family has suffered enough. But I knew it was time to act. I wouldn't let Tyler keep deceiving, wouldn't let my parents suffer more. I knew what I had to do. If Tyler had dared to build an entire life on lies, denying his parents, rejecting his past, wrapping himself in the guise of a successful man, then I would be the one to expose it all. I wasn't doing this out of hatred, but for the truth. If he could climb to the top by stepping on his family, then I would tear down that fake throne, right in front of the people he was trying to fool. After that conversation, I couldn't sleep. Late at night, I sat alone in the living room under the yellowish light, scrolling on Dad's old laptop. The ceiling fan creaked like the ticking of a clock, reminding me that time waits for no one. I began spending time researching the bride's family, the Carter lineage. Just typing Carter and Company into the search bar brought up a flood of articles. They weren't an ordinary family. They were one of the most powerful dynasties in Texas, with a massive real estate empire spanning from Houston to Dallas. Charles Carter, Madeline's father, frequently appeared in the media, from Forbes interviews to photos at glamorous charity events. He was described as a business tycoon, with a confident smile and statements about the future of sustainable real estate. His family lived in multi-million-dollar mansions, belonged to exclusive golf clubs, and even sponsored political campaigns. Madeline, the daughter who appeared beside him in many photos, always in designer clothes with a perfect smile, like a princess of high society. But what shocked me the most was a recent interview in a local business newspaper. I clicked on it, and my heart nearly stopped. Tyler was standing next to Charles Carter, shoulder to shoulder in front of the company's backdrop. The article's headline, Charles Carter introduces future leader, Tyler Grayson, promising tech entrepreneur. Tyler was presented as a promising tech entrepreneur, the future leader of Carter and Company. He wore a shiny suit, hair perfectly styled, smiling confidently as if he'd been born a billionaire. The article detailed Tyler's startup journey, from a real estate management software idea to partnering with Carter and Company. Not a single mention of his criminal past, not a line about his poor family in Houston. It was all fabricated, woven from lies. I read it over and over, blood rushing to my head. Tyler, my brother who once cried and begged for money from our parents, was now being praised as a business genius? How had he climbed to that position? With my money? By denying his roots? Anger surged, but I suppressed it, taking notes on every detail. This was evidence, not just for me, but for the world if necessary. The next day, I decided to confront him. I tracked down the address of the luxury apartment Mom had mentioned in passing when Tyler once bragged about it. The complex was on the outskirts of Houston, where high-rise buildings sprouted like mushrooms, with sparkling swimming pools under the sun. I parked the old rented truck outside the gate, walked in, trying to act normal even though my heart was pounding. The atmosphere here was worlds apart from our old neighborhood. The smell of freshly cut grass, soft music from an outdoor cafe, and residents dressed impeccably coming and going. I rang the doorbell of the apartment and waited. Footsteps approached, then the door opened. Tyler stood there wearing an expensive shirt, fine silk fabric, top buttons undone, holding a glass of red wine, his face flashing with confusion when he saw me. He stammered my name, forcing a smile. "How did you know my address? Come inside." But I could clearly see the panic in his eyes, darting glances as if calculating how to handle this. I didn't say much, just silently stepped in, my cold gaze sweeping the apartment. This place was like a luxurious dream. Polished marble floors, genuine leather sofas, a modern kitchen with imported appliances, and a view overlooking the turquoise pool. The scent of wine mixed with masculine cologne filled the air, but to me it was all just a glamorous shell hiding deceit. I stood in the middle of the living room, my voice sharp without hiding my fury. The money I sent home for Mom and Dad, you took it all, didn't you? Why not say a word? Why didn't you invite them to the engagement party? Why fake your background, letting them be humiliated like that? They took the bus all the way to Dallas, standing in that lavish villa like outsiders, only to be chased away by you like beggars. Explain yourself, Tyler. Tyler crossed his arms, leaning against the bar as if trying to stay composed. His eyes looked away, avoiding mine as if afraid to meet a blade. You don't understand, Caleb. You've been in the Middle East too long. You only see part of the story, but you don't know what I've had to face here. His voice trembled, but he still tried to speak fluently, as if he'd prepared excuses in advance. I didn't squander that money. I invested it in stocks and tech startups. I wanted to build a future. Mom and Dad agreed to it. As for the engagement party, it wasn't intentional. I just thought they wouldn't be comfortable in a place like that. High society, you know. Judgmental, critical. I just wanted to save face for both sides. He rambled on, still clutching his wine glass, but I noticed his hand gripping it until it was white. His lips pressed together every time I looked him straight in the eye. It's a lot of pressure, bro. If I revealed I came from poverty, everything would collapse. My career, my relationship with Madeline's family, I just wanted a different life. What's wrong with that? I looked at my brother, no longer the teenager who once rode on the back of my bike, but a man struggling to hold on to his mask of power while his insides were crumbling. I didn't accept those evasive words. From my pocket, I pulled out a stack of printed bank statements, clear evidence of the tens of thousands of dollars I'd sent over 7 years, all flowing into Tyler's account. I threw them onto the glass coffee table. The papers landed with a dry thud like a slap to a liar's face. Explain this, Tyler. Every single dollar I sent, you drained it all. But not a cent went to Mom and Dad. They live frugally in that rundown house with rotting curtains while you live here, with expensive furniture, imported wine, and lavish parties. You used the money I sent to build this glamorous facade? Tyler was speechless. His face turned ashen like paper. He stared at the statements, then at me, eyes wavering, clearly flustered. But just seconds later, his expression hardened. His voice turned harsh. Fine. So what if I took it? You think I need this family anymore? I don't. I'm tired of growing up in poverty, mediocrity, being looked down on because of my low background. You don't know what that feels like. He stepped closer, his voice growing more bitter. I've escaped that social bottom, where the floors peel. Meals are just canned beans and the whole neighborhood mocks our family like trash. Now I have a future, money, status. Madeline and her family gave me that. I'm a tech entrepreneur. I'm no longer that poor kid in their eyes. I stood still, feeling as if someone had punched me in the chest. Tyler stared at me, then continued, each word cutting. Don't interfere. Don't ruin what I've built. You live in the Middle East, keep your self-respect, but don't drag me back into that mud pit. This is my life, not yours, and certainly not Mom and Dad's. The air in the room was ice cold, frozen, even though the Texas afternoon sun still streamed through the windows, stretching across the shiny wooden floor. I stepped slowly toward him, each step suppressing the rage screaming in my chest. Stopping in front of Tyler, I bowed my head slightly, looking straight into my brother's eyes. I didn't shout, no need to yell. My voice was calm, but each word cut through the silence like a knife. Everything you have today comes from the blood and tears of others, from my sweat, from the silent sacrifices of Mom and Dad. You're living on a foundation of lies. You think you can wipe away the past, shake off your roots, and live in peace? I paused, took a deep breath, then continued. You're wrong, Tyler. The truth doesn't need guidance. It will find you when you least expect it. And when that day comes, No one will save you. No one at all. Tyler didn't respond. He looked away, poured more wine into his glass, trying to appear calm, but his slightly trembling hand didn't escape my eyes. The wine sloshed, a few drops spilling onto the bar. He swallowed hard, trying to maintain his cold expression, but I knew he was afraid. Afraid I'd tell everything to Madeline, to Charles Carter, to the high society world he was clinging to. I turned and walked out of the apartment without another word. The door closed behind me, the lock clicking dryly as if severing the last thread where I could still see Tyler as my brother. On the drive home, the Texas wind blew strongly through the open car window, carrying the familiar smell of road dust. My heart was strangely calm, but the anger still smoldered. Tyler had chosen his path. Now I would choose mine. I wouldn't act rashly, but when the moment came, I would expose everything. Family isn't something to disown. It's the root, and Tyler was about to learn that lesson in the most painful way. In the days following the confrontation at Tyler's luxury apartment, I tried to maintain a normal routine with my parents. I woke up early, helping Mom clean the house, sweeping fallen leaves on the porch, fixing the wobbly wooden fence battered by Texas winds, and even buying a few new potted plants to place in the backyard. Mom smiled more, though her smiles were still forced, and Dad became quieter, often sitting alone on the old chair reading the newspaper, but his eyes frequently gazed into the distance. We didn't mention Tyler much, as if by unspoken agreement to avoid reopening the wound. But in my heart, he was always there, like a ghost reminding me of the betrayal. I followed him from afar through social media and scattered news articles. The photos he posted beaming beside Madeline, attending business events, bragging about breakthrough tech projects. Each time I saw them, anger surged, but I held it back. I knew acting impulsively would only hurt my parents more. I needed to wait for him to dig his hole deeper. A few days later, as dusk fell and the Texas sun set behind the old oak trees, casting a vibrant orange-red glow, Tyler suddenly appeared at our doorstep. I was sitting on the porch with Dad, fixing the old ceiling fan, when I heard a car pull up on the street. A shiny sedan, not the most luxurious, but enough to stand out in this poor neighborhood. Tyler stepped out, wearing a wrinkled white shirt, hair disheveled, face weary as if he hadn't slept in nights. Gone was the polished look of a young entrepreneur. He appeared exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and slightly hunched shoulders. My heart pounded, but I stayed calm, standing up to observe. Mom rushed out from the kitchen, hands still dusted with flour from baking, eyes wide with surprise. As soon as he saw my parents and me appearing in the yard, Tyler suddenly dropped to his knees right on the steps. No one spoke, but he began wailing as if in the climax of a dramatic play. Tears streamed down his face, hands clutching his knees, his whole body shaking like someone on the verge of collapse. "I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. I was so foolish, so ambitious. I thought if I had money and status I'd be respected. But no one taught me that the price would be my own family." His voice broke, as if each word was a confession. But to me it all sounded like a carefully rehearsed performance. He continued, tears still flowing. Madeline, her family, that world. It overwhelmed me, made me afraid. I didn't know how to tell the truth. I was a coward. But I swear I'll change from now on. Please, Mom and Dad. Please, Caleb, give me one chance. Tyler lifted his head. The fading sunlight hit his face, making the tears on his cheeks glisten like dew. But his eyes, I looked straight into them, and in those eyes I saw no remorse. Only the fear of losing everything and the desperation of someone playing the victim to salvage what was left. Tyler begged my parents for forgiveness, promising he would change from now on. In particular, he vowed that at the upcoming wedding, just a few weeks away, he would publicly acknowledge our parents in front of all the guests, no more hiding. "I'll introduce you to everyone, tell them about our family, no more secrets, I swear." He turned to me, eyes pleading. "Caleb, I'm begging you not to expose anything or make a scene right now. I don't want to lose my current relationship, lose the happiness I'm trying to hold on to. Give me a chance to make it right, please." His voice trembled, hands clutching his shirt like a child caught red-handed. "Mom, Linda trembled with emotion. She stepped forward, knelt beside Tyler, and wrapped her arms tightly around her son, tears falling endlessly. Her voice choked and shattered. "My son, I don't need anything else, just for our family not to fall apart. If you've done wrong, fix it. I forgive you. I just want us all to sit at the table again, sharing a peaceful meal." "Dad," David also approached, hesitating at first, but eventually placed his sun-tanned hand on Tyler's shoulder, squeezing gently. His voice was hoarse, full of restraint. "Stand up, son. Your parents aren't saints, but we're not stone either. No matter what, you're still our flesh and blood." Both of them turned to me, eyes red and swollen, gazes full of pleading. "Caleb, you're the older brother. All these years we've only wanted peace and warmth. We don't want to dig up the past, especially on your brother's big day. Give him a chance to make amends, please." I stood there in silence, my heart torn. Not because of forgiveness, but because I had to witness the two people who had sacrificed their entire lives once again bowing their heads for their wayward son. And also because I caught a glimpse of Tyler's eyes behind that embrace. Not just tears, but a quick flash of calculation. I remained silent for a long time, watching the scene before me. My heart pounded, anger still swirling but mixed with flooding memories. I remembered the Tyler from childhood, a bright, clever kid who innocently wore a baseball cap and ran after me all over the backyard. He grinned widely when catching the ball, shouting, "Caleb, I beat you!" On hot Texas summer afternoons, we lay on the grass together, watching clouds drift, dreaming of the future. Tyler once said, "I want to grow up like you, become an engineer, earn lots of money for mom and dad." But then Tyler grew up, stumbled, fell. He got involved with bad friends, leading to the petty theft, the price of youthful recklessness. I remembered the letters he sent from prison, full of regret. "Bro, I'm so sorry. I want to come home." I'd once thought I'd lost my brother forever, that he'd never return to being that kid. But now Tyler was kneeling at my feet, begging forgiveness, tears streaming. Despite lingering doubts, was he sincere or just a ploy to avoid exposure? I finally nodded reluctantly. Partly for my parents, partly for the faint thread of brotherly love still left in me. I spoke softly, voice heavy. "All right, but this is the last chance I give you, Tyler. Don't hurt mom and dad anymore." He stood up, hugged me, whispering thanks. We had dinner together that evening, a simple meal of grilled meat and salad, and for the first time in a long while, the house echoed with laughter. But in my heart, unease lingered. I would watch, and if he deceived us again, I wouldn't forgive. Time flew by, and Tyler and Madeline's wedding made headlines in the media. Many newspapers and social media pages featured the event, describing it as one of the most prominent weddings of the month, with attendance from numerous prestigious guests in business and media circles. I scrolled through the articles, photos of Tyler and Madeline beaming in front of a luxury hotel in Dallas. Guests including CEOs, social media stars, and even a few local politicians. The wedding of the century for young entrepreneur Tyler Grayson and heiress Madeline Carter. One headline read. I read with a heavy heart. It was all still a facade, but now he had promised to acknowledge our parents. I hoped he would keep his word. My parents prepared early. Mom, Linda, wore a light purple dress tailored at a small local shop. She twirled in front of the mirror, smiling shyly. "How do I look, son?" Dad, David, wore his simple gray suit, the only one he owned, polishing his old shoes. They sat waiting in the living room, eyes filled with excitement and nervousness. This was the first time they had been invited to such a grand event, and they believed in Tyler's promise. I sat beside them, quietly observing, my heart beating faster than usual. Tyler had called yesterday, voice excited. "The car will pick you up at 10 a.m. I've arranged everything. It'll be a wonderful day for our family." But minutes ticked by. The clock passed 10 a.m., then 11 a.m., and no car appeared. Mom kept glancing at the clock and the door, voice worried. "Maybe it's traffic, son. Or your brother is busy with something." She stood up, walked to the porch to look out, hands clutching her dress. Dad tried to stay calm, but his hands gripped his jacket tightly, wrinkles deepening on his forehead. I just sat silently, watching the clock, then my parents. And I knew they had been deceived again. Anger surged, but this time mixed with pain. Pain for my parents, who still hoped despite repeated betrayals. The choking feeling in my chest rose. My parents' eyes gradually shifted from hope to blank despair. Mom sat down, tears rolling. Maybe the car is stuck in traffic or something. Dad bowed his head, saying nothing, just sighing deeply. I clenched my fists, realizing my brother had continued to lie and disown his family. Promises were just wind, and now he was laughing at the wedding while my parents sat here waiting in vain. I resolved to teach my brother a lesson, not with words, but with action. I stood up, grabbed the car keys. "I'm going there and I'll reveal the whole truth," I said firmly. My parents looked at me worriedly but didn't stop me. The truth needed to be exposed, right in the most dazzling place, before the most glamorous people. I sped off on the highway to Dallas, wind whistling through the windows like an urging call. My heart pounded with anticipation and resolve. This time Tyler wouldn't escape. The 2-hour drive on the Texas highway seemed shorter under the raging anger boiling inside me. The sun had fully set, leaving a pitch-black sky dotted with distant twinkling stars, like silent witnesses to everything about to unfold. The old rented truck sped along, headlights slicing through the darkness, illuminating familiar highway signs. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, my mind swirling with images. My parents waiting in vain in the living room. Mom wiping away tears, Dad bowing his head in silence. They had sacrificed too much, from the grueling days working to raise my brother and me, to swallowing their tears while enduring Tyler's betrayal. And now, he had deceived them again, disowned them once more. The kneeling promises of forgiveness were just a farce, a ploy to buy time. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but the anger was like an underground river ready to burst forth. I wasn't a vengeful person. I was the older brother, and this was the only way to save what remained of our family. When I arrived in Dallas, the city was lit up, skyscrapers glittering like another world. The hotel hosting the wedding was a magnificent architectural marvel, with a glass facade reflecting neon lights and a parking lot packed with luxury cars. I parked in a shadowed corner, turned off the engine, and took one final deep breath. In my pocket, I carried the evidence. Old family photos, the 4 of us smiling brightly in front of our Houston home, Tyler's birth certificate, and a copy of his criminal record from 9 years ago from the theft case. I'd prepared them long ago after the confrontation at his apartment. Now they would be my weapons. I stepped out of the truck. The cool night wind seeped through my shirt, but my body burned with adrenaline. I strode through the main entrance past the security guards. They only glanced at me, assuming I was a late guest. The grand hall appeared before me, even more opulent than the engagement party. Crystal lights beaming from massive chandeliers, fresh flowers arranged in heart shapes, soothing music from a live orchestra, and the scent of expensive perfume mingling with fine wine. Everything looked perfect, a dream wedding for the elite. I entered the grand hall just as the ceremony was transitioning to the ring exchange, one of the most important rituals. The room was packed with guests, several hundred people, all focused on the couple at the altar. Tyler stood there in a sleek black tuxedo, hair perfectly styled, forcing a smile beside Madeline, radiant in her crystal-embellished white wedding gown, with a long, flowing veil. The officiant was saying something about eternal love, and light applause rippled through. No one noticed me at first. I was just a man in jeans and a wrinkled shirt, out of place among the suits and evening gowns. But I didn't stop at the entrance. I strode toward the stage, face cold as stone, each step heavy but resolute. People began to notice. Whispers grew as I appeared. Tyler turned his head, perhaps hearing the murmurs. The moment our eyes met, his face drained of all color. His eyes widened in horror, mouth agape, and he instinctively stepped back as if to block me, but it was too late. His hands trembled, the ring nearly slipped from his fingers. Madeline frowned, following his gaze to me, recognizing me immediately from the engagement party. The bride's family, especially Madeline and her parents, looked at each other in confusion, not understanding what was happening. Charles Carter, the powerful father, stood from the front row, face flushed, whispering something to his wife. The officiant paused, the microphone falling silent. The entire hall held its breath. The music faded, leaving only spreading whispers like waves. Tyler quickly stepped forward, eyes pleading, trying to whisper something to stop me. "Caleb, stop. Don't do anything stupid now, I'm begging you." His voice shook, hands raised in supplication, but I gently pushed his arm aside and continued forward, unwavering. I stepped onto the stage, standing tall under the blinding spotlights, surveying the silent hall. Hundreds of eyes fixed on me. Curious, shocked, some already raising phones to record. With a clear, resounding voice echoing through the microphone I'd taken from the officiant, I introduced myself. "I am Caleb Grayson, the biological older brother of the groom, Tyler Grayson." The air in the hall seemed sucked dry of oxygen. The crystal chandeliers overhead still blazed, but their light now felt cold and pale. I stood there on the lavish stage, looking directly at the rows of guests, hundreds of eyes waiting. My voice rang out, not shouting, not furious, but calm and weighty, like the tolling of a final indictment. "Today you all came to witness a perfect wedding, a flawless performance. But behind that curtain is deceit, and I, the groom's brother, am here to speak the truth." I took one step forward, as if drawing the entire room closer to reality. Tyler, the man standing there, is not the successful entrepreneur everyone believes. He was born and raised in a poor neighborhood in Houston. That rundown house, with scratched wooden floors, curtains faded and torn by sun and wind, is where we lived with our parents. He once went to prison for theft, a mistake that could be forgiven if there was true remorse. But Tyler has never faced it. Instead, he built a perfect facade with money. Money from our parents and money from me. Sent home over 7 years while I worked as an oil engineer in the Middle East. I paused briefly. The room was dead silent. Whispers rippled from the back like a spreading wave. He said his parents were dead, that he had no family left. He denied his roots, denied his own blood, all to enter a different class, to stand here before you all as someone worthy of Madeline Carter. The hall fell into stunned silence. Some mouths gaped open. An elderly woman clutched her chest, eyes wide in shock. The murmurs turned into chaotic chatter. Tyler stood on the stage, face ashen, eyes vacant. He tried to speak, but without a microphone, his throat seemed choked. Madeline stepped forward, face pale. She recognized me, the man who had silently appeared at the engagement party. Her voice rang out sharp but trembling. "Who are you? What are you here for? This is all fabricated. You're a saboteur." She gripped her bouquet as if to crush it, eyes blazing with anger. But I remained calm. From my pocket, I pulled out a stack of papers, holding them up steadily under the lights and dozens of flashing cameras. "These are my family photos, our parents, me and Tyler, in front of our Houston home. This is his birth certificate. This is the criminal record from 9 years ago. Court certified. All of it is the truth." My voice echoed louder, no longer restrained, an uncompromising revelation. "Tyler didn't just deceive you, Madeline. He deceived everyone, the Carter family, friends, even himself." The hall descended into chaos. Some stood up, others pulled out phones to record. Media crews pushed forward, cameras clicking, voices shouting in disarray. I saw the collapse spreading across faces like an ornate wall doused with cold water, plaster crumbling in chunks. Madeline began trembling from shock and rage. She stared at the papers being passed around. The birth certificate, criminal record, old family photos. Her face drained of color, lips pressed tight. Moments later, she stood before Tyler and slapped him hard across the face, the sound echoing through the hall like a gunshot. "You're a liar," she screamed, eyes red, tears streaming. "You lied. You told me your parents were dead, that you had no family left. How dare you? How could you deceive me all this time?" The bridal bouquet fell from Madeline's hands, hitting the floor and scattering petals across the polished wood. Her wedding gown crumpled as she collapsed in exhaustion, wailing in panic. "I loved you, Tyler. I went against my entire family for you. I trusted you, defended you against all the gossip. Is this the truth?" Tyler clutched his cheek, staggering back, face paper white, lips quivering. "Let me explain. I didn't mean to—" She looked up, voice hissing through clenched teeth. "Didn't mean to? You used me. You used my entire family. Money, status, those fancy parties, it was all lies. You built your future on your own parents' tears? And you dared to walk down this aisle?" Guests erupted in uproar. Some raised phones to film, others whispered. Some hurried out in embarrassment, eyes fixed on Tyler, standing isolated, body shaking. I remained on stage, gaze sharp as a blade. Madeline wiped her tears, stood up, voice hoarse but loud enough for all to hear. "I will not marry a man who lives on lies. From now on, there's nothing between us." Madeline's parents were livid. Charles Carter stood, face purple with rage, glaring at Tyler like a repulsive creature. Mrs. Carter covered her mouth, tears rolling. They turned to me with equal fury, perhaps angry that I'd ruined the wedding, but also because the truth was exposed. Without another word, they immediately left the hall, pulling the sobbing Madeline with them, displaying unmistakable humiliation and irreparable despair. The doors swung wide, hurried footsteps echoing. The atmosphere shattered. Guests buzzed loudly, whispers turned to shouts and calls. Media scrambled to film and photograph, flashes popping relentlessly, reporters crowding. A glamorous wedding had turned into a live scandal, spreading across social media in minutes. Tyler bowed his head in ultimate shame. Furious and humiliated, face flushed, he hurled bitter words at me. "You're a destroyer! You're jealous of me, aren't you? You've ruined my life!" His voice broke, tears flowing, then he fled, rushing out the back door before media could surround him. The officiant stood frozen. Guests began leaving in trickles, whispering and gossiping. I didn't respond. I silently turned and stepped down from the stage, heart still pounding but feeling an extraordinary relief. Reporters swarmed, thrusting microphones and blocking my path. "Are you really Tyler's brother? Why did you do this? Do you have more evidence?" But I just bowed my head, slipping past them like a cold wind, leaving no words behind. I walked out of the hotel. The night wind blew strongly, carrying the chaos from inside. On the drive back to Houston, the dark highway stretched ahead. I thought of my parents. They would hurt, but at least the truth had been told. Tyler would face the consequences, and perhaps one day he would understand. But for now, I just wanted to go home, hug my parents, and begin healing the wounds. The drive back to Houston took 2 hours, but to me it felt like an endless stretch of time for reflection. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating highway signs that whipped by in a blur. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline of the moment on stage. Images replayed in my mind: Tyler's ashen face, Madeline sobbing, and the chaotic hall. Had I done the right thing? Would my parents blame me for destroying their younger son's big day? But then memories of Mom waiting in vain in the living room, her light purple dress crumpled and Dad clutching his jacket with bowed head, strengthened my resolve. They deserved respect, not to be disowned like homeless strangers. Wind whistled through the slightly open window, carrying the familiar Texas road dust scent, and I told myself, this is the beginning of truth, however painful. I arrived home late at night. The neighborhood was silent under the yellowish streetlights. My parents were still awake, sitting in the living room with cups of cold tea. Mom rushed to hug me as soon as the door opened, tears streaming. "Are you okay, son?" Dad patted my shoulder, voice hoarse. "Tell us what happened at the wedding." I sat down and recounted everything, from entering the hall to the ensuing chaos. They listened. Mom covered her mouth and cried. Dad nodded silently, You did what needed to be done. I know it wasn't easy, but you did the right thing, Mom whispered, her voice trembling. We hugged, tears falling in the old room, and for the first time in days I felt relief. But I knew the consequences were just beginning. In the days following the scandal, American media covered it relentlessly, like a storm sweeping every corner. The next morning, as I woke early to brew coffee, my phone buzzed nonstop with social media notifications. Major outlets unanimously reported on the true background of young entrepreneur Tyler Grayson, once hailed as the future of Carter & Company, now revealed to have a criminal record and to have hidden his poor family. I opened the laptop and scrolled through headlines. Elite wedding scandal. Groom deceives about background. Brother exposes him mid-ceremony. On a famous tabloid known for celebrity drama. They posted leaked videos from the hall, showing me on stage, voice resounding as I told the truth. Business Insider, a reputable business publication, ran an in-depth analysis. From promising entrepreneur to fraud, the story of Tyler Grayson and the collapse of an elite dream. They delved into Tyler's criminal record, interviewed experts on identity fraud in business circles, and compared it to famous scandals like Anna Delvey, the woman who faked her identity to climb New York society. The bride's family, the Carters, reacted swiftly. Just 2 days later, they held an official press conference at the company headquarters in Dallas. I watched on TV, sitting with my parents in the living room. Charles Carter stood at the microphone, face stern, flanked by his wife and Madeline, who looked gaunt, eyes red beneath heavy makeup. He announced the wedding cancellation, termination of all personal and professional ties with Tyler, and apologized to the public for failing to verify information. "We were deceived," he said gravely. "Tyler Grayson is not the man we thought. Carter & Company commits to transparency and will conduct an internal investigation." Madeline said nothing, only bowing her head in tears, but later, in a separate interview with People magazine, she detailed, "He told me his parents died in a car accident, that he built everything from nothing. I believed him. Now I just feel betrayed." They compared the case to the Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos scandal, where lies led to an empire's downfall. Tyler was immediately fired from Carter & Company. A company statement on their website read, "We terminate our contract with Mr. Tyler Grayson due to violations of ethical principles." Former partners cut contact en masse. Those who once slapped his back at business events now avoided him like the plague. His social media accounts were flooded with attacks, negative comments overwhelming. "Pay back your brother? From prison to fake billionaire? Hollywood should make a movie about you." Memes about the ex-con entrepreneur spread everywhere. He became a laughingstock in business, media, and social circles. Tabloids even tracked Tyler repeatedly trying to contact Madeline. Calls, texts, even showing up at her home. TMZ posted leaked footage. Tyler outside the Carter mansion gate, looking haggard, shouting for Madeline. She confronted him, face flushed with fury, chasing him away. "Get out! You shameless fraud! You're a parasite climbing on others' kindness." Her voice echoed in the video, which went viral with millions of views. Tyler backed away, face pale, then fled. Not only losing his fiancée and career, Tyler was branded an identity fraud by investors, making new opportunities impossible. From luxury living, high-end apartment, luxury car, parties, he was left with a shattered reputation and society's contempt. I heard he sold his car, moved out of the apartment, and lived nomadically in cheap motels. One afternoon, about a week after the scandal, as the Texas sun cast long shadows over the neighborhood, Tyler appeared at our parents' house, disheveled, visibly thinner, clothes wrinkled as if slept in on the street. Gone was any polish, hair messy, dark circles under his eyes, faint smell of alcohol. I was in the backyard fixing the fence when I heard Mom cry out from the porch. I rushed out and saw him standing there, gaunt face glaring at us with hatred. No kneeling, no apologies like before. He immediately lashed out in blame. He shouted, voice hoarse, eyes bloodshot with rage. "You and Mom and Dad pushed me to this dead end. All these years I lived like an invisible person in my own home. You left, sent money back, and thought you had the right to judge. Mom and Dad always defended you, treated me like a burden. He stepped closer to me, eyes blazing. You destroyed the life I bled and cried to build. I was about to have everything, money, fame, a real new family, but you couldn't let it be. Why? Jealousy? You wanted to drag me into the mud so we'd all suffer? Mom burst into sobs, rushing to grab his arm. Tyler, don't say that. You're my son. I beg you, don't abandon the family. Dad approached too, voice trembling. Come inside, son, we'll sit and talk. We don't want to lose you. But Tyler yanked his arm away violently, eyes darkening as if the world had turned against him. Don't touch me, don't pretend to care when you've never truly understood me. He's the perfect one, right? Keep praising and worshiping him. His voice echoed through the usually quiet neighborhood like thunder tearing apart what little bond remained. Mom collapsed, calling his name in despair. Dad stood frozen, hands trembling on his old hat. Tyler turned and walked away in the fading sunlight, each step cutting deeper into those left behind. Mom called after him hoarsely, but he never looked back. Not once. I stood there silently, watching his figure disappear behind the trees. No words, but a vague unease rose within me, as if this wasn't the end. Tyler wasn't the type to accept defeat easily. He'd fallen before and risen through lies. What would he do next? Seek revenge or vanish forever? I hugged Mom, helped her inside, Dad following quietly. That night we didn't sleep, sitting in the living room talking about the past, the days when Tyler was little, the hopes we'd placed in him. But deep down, I knew the storm hadn't passed. Tyler had lost everything, and a desperate man could do anything. After that furious departure from the house, Tyler vanished completely. No calls, no messages, no trace at all. We tried to reach him. I called his old phone number daily, but only heard endless ringing, eventually turning to a disconnected tone. His social media accounts, once filled with glamorous photos alongside Madeline and business events, were now deactivated. My parents worried to the point of losing sleep and appetite. Mom often sat alone on the porch, staring down the familiar road where he had walked away, whispering, "Where is he? Is he eating properly?" Dad was quieter, but I noticed him staying up late, smoking in the backyard, a habit he'd quit long ago, now resurfacing as a way to cope with the pain. I tried to reassure them, saying Tyler needed time to think, but inside my unease grew. He had always been impulsive, and now, with his reputation shattered, he might do something reckless. I started checking the news daily, scrolling through local reports, fearing that one day his name would appear in the crime or accident sections. A few days later, as the scandal began to die down a bit, media shifting to hotter stories like a political scandal in Washington or a new storm in the Gulf Coast, I received a late-night call from an old friend in media from Dallas. It was Jack, a freelance reporter I'd known since college, who had once helped me dig up information on Carter and Company. The phone rang at midnight while I was tossing and turning in bed. I answered, voice groggy. "Jack, what's going on?" His voice was tense and hurried. "Caleb, listen to me. There's just been a serious incident involving your brother, Tyler, and Madeline Carter. I'm at the scene. Police just arrived." My heart seemed to stop. I bolted upright, gripping the phone tightly. "What happened? Tell me everything." From the initial reports published in the news, and which Jack relayed over the phone mixed with distant sirens, Tyler had shown up at Madeline's apartment late at night, claiming he wanted one final meeting to explain. He was likely drunk or desperate to the point of losing rationality, as neighbors called police after hearing intense arguing from the apartment. Shouting, crashing sounds, crying. It all lasted about half an hour before authorities arrived. When police broke in, Madeline was severely injured, cuts on her arm, bruises all over, and a head wound that left her unconscious. Tyler was arrested at the scene in an uncontrollable state, having attacked Madeline frantically, mumbling something about deception and paying the price. Jack continued, Police had to use pepper spray to subdue him. Madeline was rushed to emergency care, condition serious but stable. He looked like a demon, Caleb. Bloodshot eyes, torn clothes, and he was shouting your name as they cuffed him. The next morning, major outlets ran the story unanimously, like a new wave crashing over public opinion. Tyler's name appeared on front pages, no longer as a young entrepreneur or startup hero, but as a suspect in a serious criminal case. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee gone cold in front of me, scrolling through headlines. Scandal-tainted ex-entrepreneur attacks former fiancée. Madeline Carter hospitalized with serious injuries on CNN. Fox News had more details. From glamorous wedding to criminal. Tyler Grayson arrested for assault after exposure scandal. They posted photos of him being led away, blurry shots from the scene. Tyler head bowed, hands cuffed behind his back, gaunt face under reporters' flashes. I read the lines in silence without needing deep details. Just seeing the name and that photo was enough to understand everything had gone too far. Tyler, my brother, had hit rock bottom, from a liar to a criminal. My heart ached, not out of pity for him, but thinking of my parents and what they would endure. After the horrific incident at the apartment, Madeline fortunately survived, though severely injured and requiring emergency hospitalization. Reports said she suffered heavy blood loss from cuts, broken ribs, and head trauma, likely from falling while resisting. The Carter family held a press conference that afternoon at the hospital where Madeline was admitted. I watched on TV, sitting with my parents in the living room. Charles Carter stood at the microphone, face drawn, voice trembling with anger and worry. My daughter nearly lost her life to a deceitful, violent man. We confirm Madeline's condition, stable but needing recovery time. We will prosecute Tyler Grayson to the fullest extent. Intentional grievous bodily harm, unlawful entry, and everything applicable. No forgiveness, no leniency. Mrs. Carter stood beside him, sobbing, and Madeline did not appear, likely still weak. They thanked the police and asked for privacy, but public outrage exploded. Justice for Madeline trending online, with thousands sharing about domestic violence victims. Mom, Linda, sat on the sofa, holding her teacup, eyes fixed on the evening news. When the screen showed Tyler being taken away, she trembled, lips moving silently. My son. Why did he do something so foolish? She whispered, voice choking. Immediately after, she dropped the cup, tea splashing across the wooden floor, then collapsed, body slumping in a faint. Dad stood beside her, frozen face ashen, unable to react at first. It took seconds before he rushed to her side, calling her name in utter shock. I caught Mom, calling emergency services right away, though it was just shock, not life-threatening. Paramedics arrived, checked her, gave sedatives, and advised rest. I tended to Dad, pouring water, patting his shoulder, and shouldered what remained of our crumbling family. That night, after Mom slept deeply from the medication, Dad and I sat on the porch gazing at the Texas stars. He said softly, I never thought he'd go this far. I didn't reply, just nodded, heart heavy. That night, I sat alone in the living room after Dad went to bed. The yellowish light cast long shadows on the old wooden floor. I recalled every moment, the little brother who chased me on the porch, grinning when catching a baseball. The brother who cried in letters from prison promising change. And now, the man who had single-handedly destroyed everything, from reputation to freedom. I realized a painful truth. Some people not only deceive others, but deceive themselves until there's no way back. Tyler had believed his facade so blindly that when it collapsed, he knew no way to face it except violence. My heart hurt, but I had no regrets. If I hadn't exposed him, things might have been even worse. The trial proceeded quickly, just weeks after the incident. Texas justice doesn't go easy on violent offenders. I followed through the news, not attending to avoid confrontation. Tyler was sentenced to a total of 9 years in prison for intentional grievous bodily harm and financial fraud from fake dealings at Carter & Company, with no parole or reduction possible for the first 5 years. Photos of him in court, in orange jumpsuit, gaunt face, vacant eyes spread everywhere. A few weeks later, my parents and I visited him at the detention facility. We brought food, Mom's homemade sandwiches, some apples, hoping he'd agree to see us. But Tyler refused the visit, as if wanting to erase any remaining ties to the family. The guard shook his head. He said he doesn't want to see anyone from the family. We left the facility in silence, the air heavy as lead. On the drive home, Mom sobbed, asking why it had come to this. What did I do wrong? Why is my son like this? Dad was quiet, hands gripping the wheel. I didn't answer, just stared out the window at the cold passing streetlights like fleeting memories. I knew from that moment on our family would never be the same again. The house remained, but missing a piece, one that had shattered itself. But at least the truth had been spoken, and the price for betrayal, however horrific, had been paid. We would carry on, heal the wounds, but Tyler's shadow would always linger, a reminder of wrong choices. In the days that followed, I decided to request an extended leave from work, turning down remote projects in the Middle East that the company offered. I called my boss, voice calm but resolute. I need time for my family, maybe a few months. He understood after hearing a brief mention of complicated family matters. He had read about Tyler's scandal in the news. I didn't go into details. I just needed the leave to stay with my parents. Houston was now home, not the dusty oil rigs anymore. I didn't want to leave them at this time, when the wounds were still fresh. When Mom woke each morning with red, swollen eyes and Dad sat silently over his coffee, staring out the window as if waiting for something that would never come. I knew that if I left, they would be even lonelier, and the pain would slowly gnaw at them. So I stayed, turning the leave into part of a new life, a life without Tyler's shadow, but filled with efforts to heal. I started with cleaning and renovating the old house, the place that had witnessed so much of our joy and sorrow. Early mornings I woke up, bought paint from the local store, a light cream shade to brighten the walls and dispel the gloom. I repainted the living room walls layer by layer, the fresh paint smell spreading through the house like a promise of renewal. Mom stood watching, smiling shyly. My son has become a painter now. I laughed and replied, I can do even more than that, Mom. I replaced the old hanging bulb in the ceiling with bright white LED lights, making the room less dim. I bought more comforts, a new sofa, softer than the worn-out old one, a few back cushions for my parents, and an air purifier to keep the house air cleaner, since Dad often coughed on cold, windy days. I carefully prepared medications, buying a small medicine cabinet, organizing blood pressure pills for Dad, vitamins for Mom, and some cold remedies as backups. I even installed grab bars in the bathroom for my parents to hold on to. Sturdy metal ones firmly attached to the wall, because I'd seen Mom steadying herself against the wall while showering, afraid of slipping on the wet floor. Each small task was my way of making up for the years away from home, for the pain Tyler had caused. Time passed slowly but steadily, like Texas autumn rains washing away the dust. No one in the neighborhood or the media mentioned the old story anymore. Neighbors gradually opened up again. Mrs. Smith next door brought over homemade cookies, asking, "How's your family doing now?" And Mr. Johnson at the end of the street patted my shoulder when we met on the road. "You're a responsible family man, Caleb." Public opinion forgets quickly, moving on to new scandals, and our family's story gradually faded into oblivion. My parents grew calmer too, smiling more, eating better. Mom began humming old songs from her youth while doing housework, and Dad started morning walks, breathing in the fresh air. The house came alive, brighter, warmer, even if one seat at the dinner table remained empty. One early autumn afternoon, when the oak leaves began to turn yellow, a cool breeze swept through the porch carrying the scent of damp earth. We received a letter from the prison. It arrived by mail in a plain white envelope with scrawled handwriting listing the sender, Tyler Grayson. I picked it up, opened it, and read it slowly to my parents, word by word, as if afraid to miss any. In the letter, Tyler apologized for his betrayal, for cruelly turning his back on his roots. He wrote, "I'm sorry for betraying you, for heartlessly abandoning those who loved me most. Every night in prison is sleepless. I'm haunted by your faces, Mom and Dad, and Caleb's disappointed eyes. I was wrong. So wrong I dare not lift my head. I don't dare ask for forgiveness. I only hope that one day I can start over, even if just in your hearts." The handwriting trembled, some spots blurred with ink, perhaps from tears. No promises, no pleading, just belated remorse. We fell silent after reading it. The living room air grew heavy, only the wind whistling through the window. Mom reached out to hug me, tears flowing silently, her shoulders shaking. Dad just nodded, eyes gazing distantly at the sky, turning pale yellow at day's end. I folded the letter and placed it in the small wooden box, where Mom still kept important things from years ago. Their wedding photo, our birth certificates, and now this final letter from Tyler. I stood up, stepped onto the porch, watching the sky shift to the soft yellow of dusk, leaves drifting down in the autumn wind. The cool air seeped into my skin, carrying the familiar smell of decaying leaves. I thought about everything that had happened, from the shock of returning home and witnessing Tyler humiliate our parents at the engagement party, to the sleepless nights hearing Mom cry, the confrontation at his luxury apartment, the collapsed wedding, and now the horrific crime leading to imprisonment. The invisible wounds, emotional pain, shattered trust, deeper than any cut. But through it all, I realized a message. No family is perfect, but if love remains, forgiveness and healing are still possible. Sometimes the deepest cracks reveal who truly stays until the end. Tyler had abandoned us, but Mom, Dad, and I were still here together. From that, I learned a lesson for myself. Truth, however painful, must be spoken. Prolonged silence only widens the gap, as we once stayed silent about Tyler's downfall, hoping he'd change on his own. But no, truth is a bitter medicine, but necessary. I understood that what holds a family together isn't blood, but patience and kindness. The hugs, the meals, the daily check-ins. And the advice I want to share with everyone. If you still have parents, stop by and share a simple dinner with them, like I still do. It doesn't need to be fancy, just your presence. Because one day you'll wish you'd stayed a little longer, listened to one more story, given one more hug. I went back inside. Dinner was already set on the table. Golden roasted chicken, smooth mashed potatoes with melting butter, fresh green salad, and cornbread, Dad's favorite. Mom ladled more soup for him, voice cheerful despite her red eyes. "Eat up, dear, it'll get cold and lose its flavor." Dad chuckled at the cornbread, voice hoarse. "You still remember my favorite?" We sat down, the clink of spoons against bowls warm and comforting. Outside on the porch, a gentle breeze rustled through the pots Mom had planted yesterday. I looked out and saw the leaves swaying as if whispering something only the heart could hear. Our family, though once broken, though we'd hurt each other deeply, was still here. Still able to share dinner, still able to call each other by familiar names. And I understood. As long as we stayed together, there was still hope to heal. It was still not too late to love again from the beginning.